Today, we're discovering a shocking, lesser talked about, almost cannibalistic crime. Stick with us for the gruesome and sad details. We begin this case in a town called Agoid in Caerphilly, South Wales, England. Its name is Welsh for by a wood or by a grove, and it is a historic and sleepy town just over 132 miles away from London. The population of Agoid at the 2011 census was just a mere 2,769. In the nearby area of Caerphilly called Blackwood, a man named Matthew Williams grew up being the eldest of 4 brothers. He lived with them and both of his parents until they divorced when he was just age 10. Whether some of it be tied to trauma from his parents' separation or not, many details of his life from then moving forward are tied to early drug use, violence, and mental health issues. At the age of 11, Williams began openly smoking cannabis and rebelling. Just 2 years later, he was expelled from school for fighting consistently, and by the age of 15, he had simply dropped out of the school system altogether. His parents aided him in seeking help for his drug abuse as an early teen, but failure to follow through with any treatment landed him his first custodial sentence in a Young Offenders Institute the very same year. He was admitted to Cerys Acute Mental Health Inpatient Unit in Blackwood in April 1997 after being charged with attempted theft and burglary. His stay there was short, as he managed to be caught using cannabis just 2.5 hours after being admitted, breaking their drug-free policy. He was sent away soon after. His running total: 26 convictions for 78 offenses, including wounding with intent, assault, and various drug and weapons offenses. A shocking 41 of his crimes were handed to him only as a child in juvenile custody, and the final 14 during his transition into adult prisons. Besides his clear behavioral issues, given his persistent drug use, Williams was prone to experiencing extreme psychological and psychiatric effects, according to an inquiry opened by the HIW, or Healthcare Inspectorate Wales, which was carried out following the murder to come. 34-year-old Matthew Williams was on probation, 2 weeks into his freedom from prison following a 2-year sentence for the assault of his former partner. Since he served the entirety of his sentence, he was given very little supervision by the law and the courts, leaving him a free man to pick up the pieces for better or for worse. We don't know how he spent the beginning of this particular day, November 6, 2014, but he ended up returning back to his residence at the Cerys Arms Hotel in South Wales, a hostel that also serves as a halfway house where offenders recently released from prison. Williams' father, Christopher, had originally requested that he be housed closer to him in the town of Newport following his release, but the council of the area did not consider him their responsibility and therefore sent him to the Caerphilly Council instead, which housed him at the Cerys Arms. He told the inquest later that his son had wanted to start a new life, and that "I said that over the years, when he goes to Blackwood, he ends up in prison sooner rather than later." He added, "He had done painting and decorating in prison. He wanted to set up a business, and I'd have helped him with that. I'd have got a van. He had done some work for me." With Matthew on his way home this day was a 22-year-old shop worker named Cerys Yemm, having met her on a night out in Blackwood just 2 weeks before. The pair drank beer and smoked marijuana together in his room, so it's clear that they were friendly with one another, but we don't know the true nature of their relationship or what exactly occurred prior to the following events. Later on in the night, the hostel owner suddenly heard blood-curdling screams coming from a nearby rented room of theirs, room 7. They ran towards the scene with their son-in-law, keyed in, and swung open the door. The bloody carnage they then witnessed happening would haunt even the toughest of people for life. 2 of them were met with William atop Yemm, covered in her blood and growling like a feral animal as he stabbed her violently with a screwdriver. She told authorities that it looked like Williams had black eyes when she saw him, later comparing his face to that of Darth Maul. Her terrified son pointed to the victim and said, "That's a girl there," to which Miles replied, "That's no girl," unable to tell the victim was previously even a human being due to the extent of her injuries. Williams did not look up at them once and continued his attack with reckless abandon. Miles called 999, England's emergency phone number, telling the operator in a panic that she'd thought she'd seen the killer attempting to eat the victim, but later investigations proved these claims to be false. She then shut the door of Williams' room, and held the knob shut to block the killer in after she realized that Yemm was certainly dead. She said she knew something must have been wrong with the man, considering he was not fazed by her entering the room one bit. He just continued the attack. She once told the BBC, "Who in their right mind would just carry on leaning and looking down? A reaction like that, me walking in, would make you stand up. It would make you lift your head. That told me he didn't know what he was doing." 14 minutes after the call, Police Chief Alan Cotterill was first to arrive at the scene to attempt to subdue Williams, tasering him 4 times upon realizing that he would be unable to control the situation. Later in court, he said he has never felt more scared in all his life. He claims he considered trying to engage with Williams, but felt that he just looked possessed and totally vacant. Once tased, Chief Cotterill and other responding officers handcuffed Williams, quickly placing him in leg straps. But soon after, the killer stopped responding entirely and was pronounced dead on the scene due to cardiac arrest. Later, 2 partnering cardiologists claimed Williams suffered this cardiac arrest due to the cocktail of amphetamines and mephedrones he used at the time, bodily stress caused by the attack on Yemm, and the tasing by police. A report was actually filed citing concerns claiming excessive police force used on Williams that night. An investigation on the responding Gwent police officers eventually found that they had acted with reasonable and necessary force during the high-risk, traumatic circumstances. When investigators later recovered Yemm's body from the scene, there were notable injuries to both of her eyes, with one being completely removed from her skull. She suffered sustained blows to her nose, ears, and mouth, as well as deep bite marks spread across her body. Both of her facial arteries were completely severed, which was noted to likely have caused her to lose blood and eventually consciousness very quickly into the attack. A post-mortem examination revealed she had at least 90 separate injuries across her body, her cause of death being sharp force trauma to the face and neck. While there were many bite marks across her body, a real bite had not been taken, so an act of cannibalism could not be claimed and Williams would not be charged for it posthumously. We already knew of Matthew's high-risk behavior prior to this brutal murder. Was there something that the law missed here? Well, in 2004, Matthew Williams was formally diagnosed with schizophrenia, which could explain a large amount of his outlandish visions and erratic behaviors. But this diagnosis was disputed by the many healthcare professionals who treated him. He was only admitted into a psychiatric unit under the Mental Health Act, and was not because of the need that he so clearly had. He spent only 5 years in this unit until his discharge into care under Caerphilly-based community mental health teams. A year later, in February 2005, he was jailed yet again. The verdict this time around was 5 years for burglary, theft, and wounding. Later burglary offenses led to yet another jail term in 2009, and upon release, he was referred to a community psychiatric nurse. 1 year later, the sessions ended because he had not shown any true signs of a psychotic illness. For many of us, this is hard to believe. After experiencing hearing voices, having hallucinations, and paranoid thoughts, during his later prison stays, he was finally prescribed medication. Williams routinely refused to take it, though, claiming unpleasant side effects and lack of actual help. His prescription for this medication ceased in 2014 after an apparent absence of psychotic symptoms. He was reported to be functioning well, even holding down a job as a prison barber before his release in October, shortly before the murder. The hostel owner said to another publication that Williams' actions were a true shock considering his previous good behavior around her. His behavior in prison prior to his release was described as pleasant and polite, and with a high level of functioning. During one prison release, he was assessed by homeless charity staff to find out his housing needs. A charity worker working on Williams' housing case said he was released, describing him as quiet, having strange eyes, and seemed sad, but concluded overall that he was doing very well. Other people who came into contact with him during the 2 weeks he was out of prison reported him as feeling low and not hopeful for his future, but certainly not displaying any psychotic or schizophrenic symptoms. His doctor said he even showed no signs of schizophrenia the week before the attack and said he appeared smart and seemed pretty well. This brings us to the point. How was Matthew doing so fine to the state, but collapsing behind closed doors? A forensic psychiatrist who treated Williams at Park Prison from February 2014 until his release 2 weeks before the murder concluded that his past psychotic symptoms were most likely drug-induced. He did also claim that Williams' symptoms were very likely to return if he started using drugs again, especially considering that his prescribed antipsychotic medications would provide disastrous outcomes if Williams were to take them at the same time as illegal drugs. The HIW report authors concluded also that he was a complex individual with long-standing mental and social problems, but that there was good evidence his mental health improved if he remained drug-free. But like clockwork, Williams was drinking heavily and using drugs. His harrowing schizophrenic symptoms were just lying dormant over the years and were now being fueled. A close friend of Williams, Rodri Moore, confessed that he was aware that Williams was drinking heavily, smoking weed, and taking amphetamines in the days prior to the murder. He told The Sun that Matthew was completely normal during the first few days after his release, but that soon after, he said when he looked at a can of Coke, he could see faces in its packaging. Experts say that his drug abuse, drinking, and mental health struggles likely brought on a condition called excited delirium, the symptoms of which include insensitivity to pain, no response to verbal commands, growling animal noises, and unusual strength, all signs clearly exhibited by Williams during and after the attack. During the trial, Williams' post-mortem defense team claimed if he had been living in Newport with his father, he would have been away from his former drug-taking friends in the area where he grew up and on a new path. The offense claimed that Williams had sent sporadic letters threatening to kill others while in prison, and that he would have always been a danger to society given his past and mental health struggles. In the end, the Gwent County coroner David Bowen explained to jurors that the only finding they could make in true respect of Miss Yemm's death was that of unlawful killing. Following the trial and seeing the news reports of the gruesome murder, his mother, Sally Ann Williams, explained to the public yet again that after her son was released from prison, he was given no supervision or medication to upkeep his mental health, and that soon he admitted to her that he was hearing voices again. In a statement, Miss Yemm's family said her death had devastated our family, and we feel that there should be reform of the systems of monitoring and information sharing between agencies when offenders are released from prison. The hostel owner, along with Sally Williams and much of the general public, believe that this terrible crime could have been entirely avoided and that this should be considered a failure by the government. Mandy Miles explained later on to The Guardian that when a former prisoner stays at her hostel, she isn't given an overview of exactly what they did, so she has no way of knowing whether or not they have a violent past for data protection reasons. She strongly believes that if authorities would share more pertinent information about the people moving into halfway houses, it would in turn save lives. In the aftermath of the case, Williams' family spoke publicly further, describing Matthew as a troubled man who had struggled to get the help he needed for mental health and drug issues in prison or the community. We hope that this case will highlight the need for better mental health care and lead to the effective sharing of information between state agencies, and that another family will not have to go through what the families touched by this inquest have had to endure. Mandy Miles still runs and operates the Sir Howie Arms Hotel, permanently banning guests from staying in room 7. The last time she spoke publicly about the incident, she was planning to have the door removed and use it for storage, to keep grim visitors and curious people out. The outcome of this case brings forward many questions. Mental health is so often not taken seriously by governments around the world, and this isn't the first or last time that an oversight has led to a tragedy. So many grieving families, changed forever by one fatal night, and to think it could have been prevented, and Cerys would still be alive if the right people in charge had cared enough for William Matthews' well-being. Our thoughts are with both the Williams and Yemm families. If you enjoyed this harrowing tale, then go ahead and like, comment, and share. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell button to stay up to date on all the ongoing developments of true crime cases in the news. Stay safe, friends. Until next time.